Good evening. Welcome to the June meeting of the ABC League of Women Voters. League is a nonpartisan organization whose purpose is to increase voter involvement and engagement with our government. We help register voters, we conduct candidate forums, and we hold, among other things, we also hold monthly meetings to talk about topics in which our membership has expressed an interest. Tonight, our speaker is Pam Riddle, and Pam is talking this evening about a transgender, and her daughter is transgender, and she's going to share with us her experiences. The audience will have an opportunity to ask questions. Again, we'll remind you to send in your questions so that the TV audience can also hear. So Pam, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Pam Riddle. My pronouns are she and her, and I like to include my pronouns when I am in a meeting with people that I don't know very well. So I am the proud parent of a transgender child, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about our journey of raising a transgender child. It actually started when my daughter was pretty young. I didn't realize it was starting, but looking back, I realized when she was 3, she loved to dress up in princess dresses and stuff, and she just loved that. And then at night, she would wear a blanket on her over her head and pretend she had long hair. And she just kept continuing to like this activity and kept doing it, and that was fine. There's no issue with it. But as she got older and continued to like to do it, probably when she was about 4 and a half, we started getting into more play clothes that were dresses rather than the princess dresses for pretend play. She would do pretend play, but in sundresses and dresses that other girls would wear. And then when she was 5, that's her preferences for birthday gifts and Christmas presents and things like that. What she would ask for were what we typically believe are girl toys, and her preferences were what we believe to be girl colors, like pink and purple, and she loved all that stuff as well. And then I noticed that kids would be saying that's for girls or that's for boys, and I taught my kids as well as my neighbors' kids that it's not fair that a doll is just for a girl. It's not fair to boys. They're welcome to like a doll or like pink or whatever. There's no such thing as girl toys and boy toys. But then at home, she would play inside the house as dress up. But then as she was 5 and she liked to socialize with the neighbors. And eventually, and this was actually when she was 6 and a half, she asked to go to the neighbor's house in a dress. And I said, sure. And she put her dress on and skipped across to our yard to the neighbor's yard. And I've never seen her happier. So that moment, I realize now, is the moment when I knew. At the time, I didn't know what I knew, but I knew that was something. And my advocacy began right around then. And I searched and searched for a therapist to help my daughter figure out if that's what she needed to do. And that actually was very difficult at the time because there weren't enough resources. The one place that people tend to think is the only place for therapists around here had like a 2-year waiting list. So just called around and finally talked to someone who trained people and trained therapists to know gender issues and help young kids with gender issues, and was able to see someone fairly close to our house. And so that was when she was 8, and by 8 and a half or a little earlier, she knew who she was she told me she felt she was lying to her friends by pretending to be a boy at school. So that was the spring of her second grade year. And so had the meeting with the school and over the summer and everything, and she started third grade as the person she is today. So that was a really anxious time for Mom. That day, I didn't think that day she'd ever get home from the bus that day. I was very nervous. So everything went well. The school is very supportive, or I should say has been, because she just finished 5th grade and she's moving on to middle school. And luckily for her, the staff at both her elementary school and at least some of the staff at her middle school that she's entering are very supportive. And luckily, I feel safe as a parent that she will be safe at Jackson Middle School in Champlin. So then that happened, and then I, started learning about, different laws and how, LGBTQ people are discriminated against. And that's really when I thought my voting every year, or voting Democrat, or I usually vote Democrat, but I would look at the candidates, and whoever ended up in the primary, that's who I would vote for. And I thought I was doing, a decent job. And then I realized, no, I wasn't. And I got involved with Indivisible, North Metro, and helping elect my local officials as well as national officials that will help protect LGBTQ people. And on the local end, I guess I do attend school board meetings, not all of them, but some of them, and I try and keep up and, keep the communication open about what's going on. And basically, if there's a need for some education about transgender issues or, what people know, if I can share anything with anyone, I always do that. And I always believe that if anyone asks a question, it's coming from a good place. Now, if they tell me something about my child, I don't know if I'm willing to tell them anything else. Sometimes I have, but maybe I shouldn't have. Yeah, so, another thing I do for advocacy is every year, Out Front Minnesota, which is the largest LGBTQ support group, advocacy group, I should say. They aren't a support group. They advocate for LGBTQ people, and they have a lobby day every spring, and I go to the state capitol, and I talk to my legislators and about current issues that are going on. And this year it was about conversion therapy. That did not pass at the last minute, even though there are now 19 other states that have passed it. And the country of Germany has now said they're banning conversion therapy, but not Minnesota. So that's probably another issue. So I, advocate where I can, educate where I can. That's part of advocating at this point. I'm my child's only voice at this point because she is 11 and doesn't advocate for herself or doesn't see a need, and I, am thankful she doesn't see the need that she needs to advocate. And I have to turn off the news at the house, and I don't know. That's, I guess, about all I can think of for right now. If anyone has any specific questions about our journey, you're welcome to ask. And I, you write them down so she can read them. So
I do have one question
okay,
that we can start with, and it's a question that many of us share.
good.
The use of they and their pronoun for a single individual. Sue wrote this as an English teacher, but it's my question too. So as an English teacher, I find it hard to use a plural pronoun with a single individual, and we are all sure there's a good reason for it, and we would like to understand what it is.
Sure. Yeah. Well, since I started this journey personally, um, I've noticed so much more about gender that we take for granted just because it's easy if we are in a binary world. But through my daughter and getting educated, I see we're not in a binary world. Some of us are not. And so to be respectful, if someone says their pronouns are they or them, it usually means it's never one thing. It's going to mean that they are sometimes they are a boy, sometimes they're a girl, or sometimes they're neither, or all of the above, because gender is a spectrum, and they just, sometimes just they don't fit in one, two genders. I don't know. There's several genders according to some studies. So I wish I could give you an example. I've read examples where it is common to use they or them as a singular.
Okay. So then,
Only, I mean, it's common in a certain phrase. I don't mean in all-day language, but so you just have to get used to it. And when I'm not sure, I always use they or them. How are they feeling today? When someone says my child, and I don't remember if they had a girl or a boy, so I said, oh, how are they feeling today? Something like that. I don't know. Does that answer it, or is there more?
it does. So I just want to go back and see if I'm capturing this. So then, an individual's gender in maybe multiple cases tends to be fluid. Is that fair to?
Mostly, but there are people that it's not. And if someone says they're gender fluid, it means that usually they know that there's a gender that they feel, but that gender could change. But like one day they're gonna feel like a girl, or inside they are a girl one day, but the next day they feel more masculine, and they are masculine, and they often go by they them.
So before I go get a question, I'm gonna ask you this question. So you talked a little bit about how you've advocated for your child, but how did you educate yourself? Thank you.
Good question. Well, the first person I talked to, another person who actually lives in the same community, lived in Champlin as well as myself, who had a child the same age, and I talked with her one-on-one, and that was kind of my, oh, okay, I can breathe. Okay, this isn't, it's not the end of the world. It's not going to be me fighting alone. So then I turned to a local support group called Transforming Families that welcomes any person that's part of a family that has anyone that is gender diverse in any way. So it includes transgender adults, transgender kids, transgender teens, and their family members. And they have monthly meetings, as well as we try and do a couple social things throughout the year, and walk in the Pride Parade and do some stuff like that. So that's where I started, and that's where my education started. Go to this meeting, and I'd ask questions. I went to 2 monthly meetings right away, and got like a good basis for a start. And then I read, there were some books, and there's also a national Facebook group, a private group that I'm part of, that Jazz Jennings' mom started that group, or she didn't maybe start it, but she's an admin. She's one of the people. So, and often people ask questions on there, and it's kind of amazing how I don't always recommend getting your education from Facebook, but if you know the right people I know there's like 3 or 4 that I listen to what they have to say, because I know where they're coming from. But so that's about where I got it. And at first I didn't know where to go, and I thought Caitlyn Jenner was going to be my education.
Okay.
I learned a little from her, not very much.
Is there an issue with our school board regarding accommodating children with transgender needs?
There is an issue. I guess how Anoka Hennepin does it is they say they take it case by case, which means if someone lets them know that maybe they're uncomfortable with a transgender student in a bathroom, which sometimes they'll know, sometimes they won't, that the school board might look at it and make a decision as to what that student needs to do. And the problem with that is they don't have enough time to deal with this case by case because they don't deal with it the right way, in my opinion, obviously. And there's 3%, the studies have shown there's about 3% of school population, high school population, that are transgender. And that's just too many kids to try and deal with on a case-by-case issue. So the problem is if they had a gender-inclusive policy, then there would be rules set in place that would allow these kids to be safe, and it would allow staff members to know what the rules are and how to handle kids who harass or bully transgender or gender diverse students. There is a lawsuit against Anoka Hennepin that it's the state, the ACLU of Minnesota, and Gender Justice are suing over the treatment of a transgender student in a locker room because the district made that student use a separate locker room as his peers, and he did end up getting bullied and harassed for being different. And it basically outed him, which means that they know that he's transgender or just that they know he's different. And so they made him a target for that by doing that.
So can you talk about an inclusive, so you must have some familiarity with an inclusive policy for gender.
Yeah, for gender diverse students.
And what that looks like, yeah.
Well, so far in our state, St. Louis Park, Richfield, St. Paul, am I forgetting one? They all have policies. In Minneapolis public schools, they don't have a policy, but they have a department, and they have rules. And it's not a formal policy, but they follow it. And they have a whole staff that help make sure these rules are in place and that these students are protected. So there's, they can be quite extensive, a policy, but it would say that a transgender student can use the bathroom or locker room of the facility that matches their identity. And that way, my child is old enough to know which bathroom she feels safest in. And it could be a separate bathroom, but that's her choice. And if someone makes her not have a choice and makes her use it, it's no longer safe if she's forced to use it.
Okay, so how does she navigate friendships and questions or comments from peers?
Friendships, she's very social, and friends are very important. So she just makes friends, and her closest friends know that she is transgender, if not all of them. I actually don't know who knows anymore and who doesn't know, because that's her story to tell. I don't tell other people. When she told me, I think it was 1.5 years ago, that I needed to stop talking about it. So it's up to her now. So, but the friendships are great, and she does sleepovers, and the families she does sleepovers with do know, but they're friends of mine too, that actually most of them knew her before she transitioned. So they saw the transition and see how happy she is, and once you know a child or a person that is transgender, you see that that's who they are. No one would want to put themselves through something to make their life difficult. So, yes. And the second part of your question was friendships. Oh, and
Comments or questions from peers?
okay, that was it. Well, and I asked her about this a lot in 3rd grade when she transitioned. And there were a couple episodes of kids saying something to her in the hallway or on the bus. And she has told me she didn't say anything, but also we practice saying, just say, nope, you don't need to know that, or just ask them the same question back, is what I tell her. And from what she's told me, she really hasn't had any issues since after a month after she transitioned.
Okay, and no bullying?
No. Mm-mm. Right. Luckily.
Do you have any other children, and how have you addressed this with them, if that's the case?
Yes, she has an older brother who's 13, and luckily in our family, he was the first to be on board. She asked him to call her his sister, and he started doing that even before her father and I started using female pronouns. So he was on board, like he seemed to understand it or get it right away. So he's been great. And I ask him every now and then about his friends, because a lot of his friends knew her when she was a boy. But most kids won't remember, because, it's about what's now and, what's happening in the future, meaning tomorrow. But he just told me yesterday, actually, he had a friend that asked about his sister transitioning. And it was actually very nice to see, because it was a 13 or 14-year-old boy that asked about her. So I was very impressed.
Okay. So this is a question that maybe, what was the response of her peers when she started the new school year as a girl? So did the kids just kind of roll with that?
They did for the most part, and I think her close friends at the school who had been to birthday parties or whatever had seen that, some toys, and if they'd been over to the house, they'd seen some of the toys that we have at the house, which are some dolls, and we have, balls, we have games, and some that some people think only girls like, and some not. So they kind of had an idea, but the first day of school, they did have a class meeting and explain, from what I was told, because I couldn't be there, but I was told, and they just explained about pronouns and the new name, and, this is how it's going to be, and yeah, I wouldn't know who would even remember that anymore, so yeah, it went well.
So when your daughter reaches puberty, does that cause you any concerns as a parent?
Yes, well,
it causes us all,
Right.
it has caused us all concerns, but you may have some different ones.
yes. Well, yeah, that's true. With puberty for a transgender child, she has a doctor that specifically specializes in gender issues, and just opened actually the gender health clinic at Children's Minneapolis. So what happens with a transgender youth that hasn't gone through puberty is they, with the recommendation of a therapist and their pediatrician, they are given blockers to stop puberty. And then after a year or more, it depends on what the doctor says. It's usually an average about 2 years of blockers, and then they start hormone replacement therapy, and she will be on estrogen, probably around starting at 14.
Okay.
But she has not started that yet. She has started puberty, but that's the doctor knows, and we're good. You have to catch it at the right time, and so hopefully soon.
Other questions? This is your shot, folks. Okay, well, thank you very much. We so appreciate your coming and
Thank you. Thank you.